3, 2. Good evening, everybody, and welcome to the next in our amazing Adventure in Truth podcast. Here tonight with my buddy, Dr. Jeff Smith. Hi, Jeff. How are you?
Wonderful, Jim. How are you tonight?
Good, man. Good to see you. Ready for another engaging deep dive into some function or form of truth today. Wanted to start us off talking a little bit, going to kind of make a broad statement here, and we'll lay it out and see where we go with it. I don't think that the universe cares what we do. Lately, for me, it's been a very interesting evolution, tapping into and kind of riding this experience of having a lot of experience in being able to come to a place of being present, being in now, allowing myself to be inspired by what's occurring in now, and then stepping into whatever that is and taking it to the next place. And that can be anything. It can be anything from being inspired in the morning to a certain flavor that I want to taste that evolves into cooking a meal that turns into, something really fabulous. And it all started with a taste. It didn't start with ingredients. It didn't start with a recipe. It started with, I want to taste this taste. And how can I create that? And then being inspired and being in that moment and allowing it to evolve. And I see this type of food, and I see if I combine these two foods and I add this ingredient, and so it becomes this wonderful orchestration of creation. And as I've made this move and settling here in Denver and loving the experience of being here, I recognize that the thing that got me here is the thing that I'm lacking in. Maybe lacking is not a good word. A thing that I want to put more attention on, which is the idea of getting here was about making a decision, which was all about what I felt I needed to do for my energy and for my experience. And I don't know that the universe really cared one way or the other, whether I was in San Diego or whether I'm here, but I feel better being here. So you would think that would kind of create a stronger alignment with self, because I feel much better about being here. But it doesn't address the question of what am I going to do now? And that question of what am I going to do now, I think ultimately requires a decision. And the decision, the reason that it comes to this point and why I made the initial statement about the universe doesn't care, is that while I sit in indecision, I feel like I'm not getting clear signals, as though it's like putting the cart before the horse. Does that make sense? That
Yes.
I'm not making a decision. I'm not calling the energy forth that creates the magic. Just like having the inspiration for, I want to taste this. I have to make a decision. Once I say I want to taste this, I have to decide I'm going to cook it, or I'm going to find it, or I'm going to do something that's going to bring it into my life.
Next
Right?
right step.
Yeah. And so the experience of moving to Denver, once the decision was made, everything, I mean, literally flooded into my world in a way that was all about, here it is. All those cooperative components, all of the things that I see as quote unquote magic in my life, was like on full throttle. I mean, both the hot and the cold water were both on at the same time, full blast, and it was just amazing. And, we talked a little bit about it in the last week's podcast, and I don't need to go into all the details about it. I just wanted to kind of start this process of, this is really interesting to be in a place where you can recognize that the universe really doesn't give a crap what you do. And yet, in order for the energy to move or to create momentum, a decision has to be made that focuses the energy, so that then that supporting mechanism can flood the environment with the things we need to accomplish that thing.
Okay.
So So and please, and this is unfolding as we're talking. So
Mhm.
I'm looking at this as I'm talking, and I'm actually getting pretty excited because I'm starting to connect dots that I've been struggling with for a while. So this is kind of cool. I wasn't expecting that, but it's kind of neat to that the idea the universe doesn't care what you do kind of gives you a freedom that it's almost like we don't know what to do with it because it's absolute freedom. There is absolutely no restriction or care about what we do here because it's all going to lead to our evolution. It's all
Yeah.
going to lead to move us somewhere distinct and positive.
Okay.
We'll start from there.
What what's coming to me about what we're talking about right now is some of the previous podcasts we've done with regard to perhaps the reason the universe doesn't care what we do is that whatever we do is an opportunity for the universe to know itself more. No matter which direction you move in, if we are expanding the sphere of knowing,
Mm-hmm.
if we all moved to the left, and the left, let's say, was love, instead of moving to the right, which is fear, we're just moving to the one side of the equation. And the universe, to truly know itself, has to know all sides, has to know all facets, all aspects of itself. So
Mm-hmm.
there's value in people coming to the planet to be criminal. There's value to people coming here to be, just really what we might judge and say difficult people to live with and to be around, and very, very selfish. And instead of the two choices that are always in front of us, take the money, help someone else. Those are always the two choices in front of us. No matter what fork in the road you're at, there's always the take the money or do something for someone else, help someone else. So if everybody was
Let me
taking the money,
clarify that because I'm not really clear what you mean by that, unless I
yeah,
missed what you said before.
no, that's
I understand the words. I'm not sure. Is that like red pill, blue pill? Is that
well, it's more selfish or selfless. These are the
okay?
choices that are in front of us at every intersection, at every turn in the road. Are we going to do something for ourselves, and it's a taking thing, and or are we going to use our energy and our focus to be kind to others and assist others? Anyway, I digress. Uh, so I'm processing this idea of, because the God needs to know itself, and to do that, the universe, God, again, the great white buffalo, however that works, has divided itself into us to have these experiences, and that at some point the upload, download, however all that works, the collective consciousness, the collective unconsciousness, we're sharing all of these experiences, and that's why it may in fact not matter what we do, because it's just a giant experiment, and there's learning to be had and to be experienced in all directions. Where I'd like to take a brief pause here is to caveat that by saying, as long as you are an adventurer, we're all travelers,
Mm-hmm.
but there are some traveling on very predictable paths and very well trodden, established paths. And some don't get very far off that path, whether it's a path of religious belief, or it's a path of status, or a path of education. Uh, they're fairly predictable, they're fairly established. And to me, that would be someone who is a traveler, but they're more of a tourist, and they're kind of watching what other people did. They're benefiting from travelers that were willing to get off the path, that I call adventurers, hence the
Well,
name of our
yeah, that's that
podcast.
whole idea of sort of following the mass conscious and the cultural shoot. I mean, it's like no different than cattle in that regard. You know, I mean, they let him out in the yard to explore a little bit and eat some grass, and then they send him down the chute. And you I love what you're saying, and one of the things that really struck me about that is the thing that's so cool about it is that there's, what is it, 7.5 billion of us on the planet or whatever, but it really to me speaks again of to energy. Bottom line, this configuration called Jim right now has a collection of vibrations that experiences everything it experiences in a very different fashion than the energy that is Jeff. And the energy that is Jeff carries vibrations that interact with the world in a completely different fashion. Even if we do the same activities, the approach, the thought process, the feelings about, the energy expended, the focus required is all driven on this nugget of energy that's now physically
Right.
called Jim.
Right.
And so the universe getting to experience so many different perspectives really has to be a telling lesson to me, or a telling something, that I'm all about the microcosm macrocosm. It's like it's all reflecting. So my life has been, I remember I told my parents this when I was a teenager. I had decided to go, I decided to go to college. I'd left my parents home when I was young, 15 and a half. Went out on my own, dropped out of high school. Actually was forced out of high school, but that's another story. But and then my best friend was going to college. I decided to visit her, fell in love with it, decided to go to school. And the thing that was so remarkable to me was, and what I said to my parents about it when I told them I was going to do this was, I'm not necessarily in it for the education. I'm here for the experience. So know that going in, and it's sort of been not sort of been, it's really been the banner call of my experience is this: I'm here to experience things. And
Mm-hmm.
so I marvel at all of those things I have, as I talk to people, as I'm driving, as I meet people or whatever, and we have conversations and I start sharing stories about parts of my life. I kind of like shock myself because I'm so surprised at how many things I've done that I don't even remember that I did until somebody says something, and so it's almost like there's very few things that I can't relate to, because now I haven't flown an airplane, but I've done a lot of other things that that particular experience. Would I enjoy it? Sure, but it hasn't come across my path yet. But I've been on lots of airplanes. I just haven't flown them. But so this idea that we're here to experience, and so if the creator, the creation, the point of creation in the universe is all about exploring the universe from all these different perspectives, then it only makes sense that we're here to do the same thing. We're from that spark. So that spark has curiosity, it has interest, it has desire, it has all of that. How do what's the touch it, feel it, taste it, smell it, you know? Come on, I need more info. I need more info. And so anyway, that was a long version of my appreciation for what you were saying, because it sparked all that interest about recognizing how powerful and how immense the freedom of what we get to do here is, and how much time we spend trying to dumb down that freedom. And
Do you
that took
remember
an interesting turn.
dumbing down the freedom? Yeah. Well, that's to me back to are we adventurers or are we tourists? And
Yeah.
again, tourists go to all the places that you're supposed to see. Um, Adventurers discover the places that the tourists eventually want to see. Yeah, but they're having a very different experience. Not that one is better than the other. I'm not going to judge that. Uh, in last week's podcast, we talked a little bit about perhaps one of the primary end of life important things to be able to reconcile with yourself is what did you learn and what did you teach?
Oh, yeah.
And I see how that could fit into our discussion tonight.
Mm-hmm.
In the same way, it really doesn't matter because we're talking about what you do. There's learning to be had no matter what you do. Can you learn from it? Did you learn from it? And can you teach from it? And I think, if Hitler is in the afterlife, wherever that is, I'm pretty sure he's able to, he probably has a podcast going, probably has stadiums he sells out on a regular basis of what was that like? What did he learn from it? What is he teaching? Because, there was a lot to learn, still is a lot to learn in looking at his life history and all that was put on him and all the changes that occurred really for the better as a result of the actions that he took and came here and established, and that actually turned out to be a good thing. And there were a lot of people that, some of the books I read talk about the people that were in the gas chambers made a conscious decision in a before life state to come here and volunteer for that, so that those of us on the planet, or those people that were on the planet when that happened, because I was not born yet,
Mm-hmm.
but the people that witnessed it and the pictures that were taken, the history that was told, still talk about it today. So obviously it made an impact. So there was teaching that occurred and lessons that were learned, even though that would be something that we would say would be an atrocity or a Holocaust, still turned out to be a good thing.
Well, it's a very interesting perspective, and I know, a lot of people, listeners, and people listening to the podcast may kind of go, well, "What the hell are you talking about?" But the reality is, there's lots of levels to experience things from, and when you think in terms of the evolution of the human experience, sometimes those changes, the adjustments, the influx of energies, the desire to grow, create circumstances which, to a limited completely moralistic perspective, looks like hellfire and damnation. Looks like it's right out of some biblical or some holy book somewhere, and God decreed and all that kind of stuff. When really, it's us creating enough momentum and energy to make massive and radical waves of change that create a new framework from which to look at the world that we're living in, to look at and to experience the world from a completely different perspective. And that perspective includes that level of evil. That perspective includes that level of violence. That perspective includes that level of social decay, because it continually reflects back the impermanence of any of it. You know what I mean? It's there is no the way. There's always.
Yes.
Right? There's and the beauty, and you said this earlier when you were talking about whether they're travelers or whether they're tourists. There is no wrong path here. If there was, I think it would be a very different experience if there was a wrong path. The only wrong path that I see is the judgment we assess against anyone traveling a path different than ours.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's been a fascinating thing for me to observe as I have been, I mentioned last week, I kind of have this weird fascination sort of following a little bit of this, a lot of this whole news stuff that's going on with the president and the country and the world. And it's just been dumbfounding in places. But this really helps, again, another level of understanding of this is isn't it amazing that we live in this world where all of these micro universes are taking place, and things are happening that we have no knowledge of, or we could have as much knowledge of it as we want to if we choose to pursue it, or if we choose to want to know about it. And that, I'm not talking just about here. I mean, you can talk about anything that's happening all over the world, good, bad, and indifferent. But how fascinating is it that we can, you can choose to engage in that story, like currently the government thing and the president and all that. You can make choices about how you engage these circumstances, and you can put your energy in it, and now you're a part of that consciousness, or you can pull yourself away from it and not participate in it and let that consciousness do its thing while my consciousness is doing something completely other, something
Right.
that supports my vibration, that supports my energy system, just like you would do for you, and quite frankly, what our president is doing for himself. He's not doing it any differently. He's fully engaged and fully diving into his experience. Right, wrong, or indifferent, it don't make no difference, and he's not changing anything whether people like it or not. He's doing his thing. Well, in a way, that's a very positive thing, similar to what you were saying about the Hitler experience. You know, he did his thing. He did his thing at 100%. He didn't equivocate his thing. He didn't sell out his thing. He did his thing. The end result created a huge shift in the world. The end result created all kinds of things. But what it created mostly was change. Enormous change that could not have been affected probably by any other means. Because at least as far as I can tell from any science program I've ever seen about anything, that kind of change comes with some form of cataclysm. In order to create new, you have to destroy the old. In order to create new, there has to be some deconstruction in order for construction to take place. You know, it's again, microcosm, macrocosm. You see it everywhere. You know, you see it in the last two cities I've lived in are being built like crazy. But you can't build something new until you destroy what's there. You can't, you got to get rid of it. And so that's where I am.
I like the idea that it doesn't matter what we do. Some of the way that makes sense to me, or what I've come to play around with as perhaps a belief system that works for me right now, is that a lot of these things might have been planned and agreed to before we show up here. And then the energies and the resources and the characters and the scripts all get handed out to us, and then we do these things. There could be
I like
some
to think of them as potentialities.
Yeah.
that we don't have any idea how we'll come forth until we're in the playground.
Yeah. Well, however it works, I don't think we have to be in fear of somehow you could mess it up so badly and break the system or break the whatever, or wind up in a place called hell. There are clear consequences that come from mass selfishness. There are feelings that, if you have a conscience, come with hurting someone's feelings or doing something unkind that we have to live with. I guess I'm trying to say there's really no free lunch with regard to no consequences for what we do. There are some physical, some emotional, some spiritual in some way. I don't claim to know what all of those are.
Well, it's just it's the basic law of cause and effect, right? For every action, there is an opposite or equal reaction. Isn't that physics? Isn't it? Is it?
Yeah, that was one of Newton's laws. The guy that made that sandwich cookie.
Yeah. That's great. Yeah. So the amount of freedom that we have, something that they talk that Esther Hicks talks about in Law of Attraction is you are so free you can choose bondage, and I love that, and I'm beginning to understand it more and more. This this idea that okay, the universe doesn't really care what we do, but it is a question of how do you, to our conversation from last week, how do I get to understand this? How do I get to understand the energy of this vehicle, the energy of this being that is here that I think I know a pretty good deal about, and yet every day is an adventure in learning and clarity and understanding and frustration and confusion, and something that was profoundly clear a week ago is a vague distant memory that I would have to like fight to get back to remember, but it's been incorporated and layered into my energy system. It's there. It's just a question of where am I putting my attention? Where am I focused? So this idea that the universe doesn't care gives me this level of freedom to explore and make decisions so that I can move forward or move in any direction. Maybe forward, forward is a linear kind of idea. So what if I want to move up or down or whatever? Um, and having that, if you can sit for a minute, even for a minute, in the feeling of having that kind of freedom, uh, uh, it's a big deal. It's it's kind of weird, you know. It's kind of weird, the idea that the universe doesn't really care what you do. You have the freedom to choose whatever it is you want, which means everything's on the table. So how do you fine tune your perception? How do you narrow your focus? How do you come to a place of making a decision? Where do you find that? What does it take to find that kind of clarity? Because even that, as I'm talking about it, is pretty enormous. You know, going back to the original premise, or the original one that I talked about wanting a taste. That seems pretty easy because I know how to get from point A to point B. I know the end result is have a desire for a taste. Oh, how am I going to do that? Well, it's going to require some food. It's going to require some seasoning. It's going to require some things, and I have all those things. So next, I can take it to the next level, and that is okay. How am I going to throw all these things into the air and make them come down to taste like what I want it to taste like? Not even how, but what's the dynamic that's going to make that happen? That's an easier one because I know how to cook. I know what food is. So, but if there's a flavor I don't know, that requires a whole other thing. That requires a whole other experience that I don't have because I don't have that flavor profile in my computer. So now I have to find, how do I get there from where do I find that flavor? What am I looking for? And so it becomes an exploration. It becomes an evolution as I explore the possibilities of the things that will take me to that experience. And I think the same is true on a much bigger scale, in day-to-day life and the choices we make. In order for me to prepare that dish, I have to know what my skills are. I have to know what my abilities are. If I want to taste something and I can't perform the operation, then something has to happen for me to get that taste. So some other thing has to happen if I'm not the cook. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So some other thing has to occur, and that other thing could be inspiration. It could be making a decision. Back to what I was saying before. Now I got to make a decision. I don't know how to cook, but I want to taste this. How am I going to get to tasting this if I can't cook? Now I'm in a conundrum. Now I'm on an adventure. Now I'm exploring some other thread of energy that I've never explored before. Um, when you take that out to the bigger portions of our lives, whether it's choosing a job or choosing a career or choosing a life path, some point it seems there has to be a decision, but what does that decision get based on? When you're not, when you don't, you know what your skills are, you know what you want, you know what you've done, you don't know what you want to do. Where do you get to decision? How does that happen, do you think?
I like to think of it as using the analogy of a screenplay and some kind of a community play, whatever they call those groups of people that come together and put a play on. I'm sure there's a name for it. I'm just blanking on what it is. But people have an idea of what the story is, and they have an idea of what character they would like to play. But there's somebody that's the director that is going to make the final decision on who gets what part. But being in the play is better than not being in the play, and being the backup second whatever is better than not being in the play, but maybe not quite as gratifying as the lead role. But there have to be all these roles, and it takes everybody to tell that story. So there's value in all of us being here, regardless of what role or what character we're playing in the play. And sometimes people don't finish the whole play. They read part of the script and they decide this isn't what I want to do, and then the backup person becomes, you know, the next up and goes on. That would be an example of that, would be like changing jobs or moving across the country or getting a divorce or something like that. Changing careers, going back to school and getting more education to do something else. So most of it.
Do me a favor here. Talk a little bit, because the thing that struck me about you were right there with your response, and the thing that struck me about it so powerfully was that and I may be making more of this than there is, but you immediately went to community. You didn't go to an individual making a something or other, trying to decide how to do. You immediately went to a community that produces an experience.
Well, that to me is our soul group. And you know, for my belief system, we travel in groups, and we find each other on the planet. You know, you could come from, you know, my girlfriend right now, she's from where is she from? Iran. And you know, it took a while for us to find each other, but it seems like we've played before, and you know, we found each other again, and here we are dancing again. I don't want to really go on and on about that, but to me, that's the community part. You know, you and I, you know, got to know each other from a mutual friend, and it seems to be a
so it's sort of a built-in experience.
I guess. I believe that we're attracted to people from an energy that transcends this present experience. There's more to your history and my history with each other than just I've known you for the last 5 or 6 years or however long it's been. It's deeper than that. I can't prove that, but that just resonates with me as more of a truth.
The thing that I really like about your description of it was it wasn't microcosm, or wasn't micro, it was macro, in that to what we were talking about earlier. Here are all of these unique experiencing energies coming together in this environment where it's all community. It has to be. It's all cooperative components, right? So it's all, whether it's something as basic as getting a job where you have to go through an interview process, there is community in there. Mm-hmm. You're seeking connection to something. So that interviewer, that potential boss, becomes a part of your deal, you know, and then the people you work with, and that community grows and builds, but more interesting in the larger scheme of that to me is this idea of seeing it as community. I don't know if that's making sense, and I may have to come back around to it, but it's the idea that I don't know that as I'm talking, I was seeing it in that way before. That you don't have to create community. It already exists. You just have to participate in it.
Yeah.
So, and you can create community if you have a tighter focus you want to bring to something. Then you have a smaller group of people that you gather with to go into those things, because maybe your larger community wouldn't be as interested or as connected to your topic, because vibrationally they're not in the same room. They're not in the same world. They're not in the same in the same place, being in that. So it was just kind of an aha, like, oh, wow,
Yeah.
okay, brings a whole new clarity to me about the idea of community.
So I'd like to backtrack just a little bit to come back to this point that you're on right now. Some of the things that we've called big T truths, or just truth, that makes sense to us from our experiences, because that's really all we have to base what we call a truth is, from our experience.
Right.
If one of the primary reasons to come to the planet is to learn and to teach, and that there's growth from that, there's evolution from that, the growth, that the learn and the teach, the fundamental level would be oneness versus separateness. That seems to be a truth that is very well established, that we come here with the belief of separateness. The progression toward enlightenment or evolution or evolving is understanding that it's really oneness, allness, that we're working toward. In addition to that, we come here with the idea that we're at some level, by age 5, 7, or whatever, there's something wrong with me, and I can't make mommy and daddy laugh anymore, and I can't make my teacher always happy with me. I have to perform in order to get acceptance and love. There must be something wrong with me. I'm not acceptable. And that's a subconscious, unconscious program that then we spend the rest of our lives trying to reprogram that. So possibly by the end of the run, which would now take us back to the point you were making, this community that we create, communion, that's oneness. We're having unity collectively, is what a community is a oneness. It's a group of individuals that are uniting to have a single mission, a single experience, a single cause, or whatever.
Yeah.
But if that cause is basically to learn self-love, I have value, I have worth, just because I'm here. Because it really isn't about what I do, it's that I am. And I'm part of this screenplay. I'm in the play. Whether I have a leading role and I'm a Kardashian, or I'm a nobody that no one will ever notice, and I don't even have a gravestone to mark my my grave or my ashes, whatever. I was here, and while I was here, I have value. I'm part of the family. I have value and worth just because I'm here. That's the job that I chose to do and the experience that I'm having. I just rambled on quite a lot there.
Oh, it was great. I mean, the value. I love the whole value pieces, and the worth piece is huge, because it's so amazing to me having this conversation. Because again, I saw another meme earlier today, and it was a picture of a baby crying, and the meme was when a child is treated poorly or is abused, the child doesn't hate the parents, the child hates themselves.
Yeah.
And it's so powerful to me that you would say that, and then I would be reflecting on that. But that idea that we're worthy by virtue of being here, because there is no other me anywhere. There is nothing vibrationally. There is nothing in this world that is vibrationally the same as me or you or anybody else. So the worth is in recognizing the power of the vibration that I have brought to the planet for whatever reason. Maybe I don't understand it. Maybe I don't know it. Maybe who knows? But the core of that vibration is adding to the community all the time. It's adding to the larger consciousness every second of every day, because every experience that I have, everything that I experience through my five senses, every dot that I connect in consciousness, every direct connection to energy that I use, whether I send a dart, whether I send a bubble, whether I send love, whether I hug a tree, whether I acknowledge the grass, every single bit of that has impact every single day that I'm on this planet. Mm-hmm. Whether and I may be unconscious of that, but part of the magic of self-worth and the realization of that is we're all doing the same thing in that fashion. We're all here doing the exact same thing. We're here experiencing this environment and then kind of reporting back, so to, in a way, kind of taking it all in and sifting and sorting it and pulling it apart and destroying it and rebuilding it and blowing it up and being nice to it and trying to work with people and trying to kill people, and all of it is just this unbelievable flow of worthiness just happening, and that's just extraordinary. I just it's almost kind of mind-blowing now as I'm sitting here just thinking about it even more deeply. Is it wouldn't be the same if it was, now what am I trying to say? If there wasn't that level of freedom in this environment, it would be a whole other thing. It wouldn't I don't even know what to, I don't even know. I mean, that sounds silly, but that's not, I'm trying to get to the words. So in the meantime, I'll hand it off.
Well, let's do a couple hypotheticals and see where this takes us. Let's see if between the two of us we can come up with some hypothetical, doesn't matter what we do, life paths, and let's see where these life paths take us, and if we don't wind up in the same place regardless of what we do. Okay, so
I like that idea.
Spend a moment and think about something common, something uncommon of, and it doesn't have to be you, it can be anybody you know, or just a completely hypothetical of someone's trying to make a decision of who they want to be, what they want to do, how they want to show up, what experiences they're going to have, and in the end, what that gets them. Anything like that come to mind?
I don't know if we want to use the example, but just because it's been so prevalent in my mind, I'm thinking of the president and the evolution of this individual. Because, and the reason I think it's a good one is because you can see a beginning and a middle, and we don't know the end. You can see the evolution and all of its glory, and you can see where it started. You can see how it's progressed, how it's changed, how it's evolved, how it's actually, I was going to say how it's devolved, but the reality is I don't know that you can actually say it's devolved. The actions that have been taken may appear to be de-evolving in some fashion, but that's not possible. It may be a form of deconstruction in order for new construction. But so if I'm understanding what you're saying, so you see this individual who has a lot of flaws, obvious flaws, not hidden flaws, not things that you have to search for, but blatant, obvious, not nice things. And yet, this person is the president of one of the biggest countries in the world. How did that happen? So, and how did that co-creative, cooperative community thing happen. He created a community. He found a way to create a message, to create a like-mindedness, to create a symbiotic experience that people would stick to, would glue to, and
Right.
did it so well that that core of people is still there regardless of all appearances.
Right. So the slogan that got all this going was "Make America Great Again," right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay. So somehow in that slogan, we have some idea of what that means, although that could mean a whole bunch of different things. The idea of again would imply we were great once, so is that the standard of our greatness, whatever that is?
Mm-hmm.
From what his second thing that he seems most well known for is he wants to build this wall. And walls create exclusion rather than inclusion, right? So that would be a separateness. That would be let's take care of ourselves. The heck with everybody else. I'm on board. Pull up the ladder is really kind of, I mean, you get on a ship, and once you're on the ship, it's like, okay, I'm on board. Pull up the ladder now. Doesn't matter. There are other people that want to get on the ship too. So he's showing up to try to reinstitute this great nation of separateness and exclusion. You cannot be part of us. We're going to take care of ourselves. Yeah. And there's a lot of people that resonate with that. Sure, yeah. It's not only the exclusiveness, but it's the oh gosh, there was another word that was right there that's like superiority, but it was the elitist maybe that goes along with that too.
Yeah.
That you're not like us, therefore you can't be on our side of the wall. But that's really not the energy that the planet is in right now. Mm-hmm. The planet, if there was a wall, would be around about, Reagan's idea was tear down the wall, right? Germany, Russian walls that were there.
Right.
Mr. Gorbachev, tear down that wall, right? Or this wall, or whatever it was. So it's just kind of interesting that we went to another country to help them tear down their wall, but now there's enough people here in ours that we want to put up a wall of our own, so that we're really not sharing our resources. And, what does that mean? Well, that means however many people that weren't naturally born here come here and want to get, the stuff that we have to offer, the healthcare and EBT cards and an opportunity to prosper. Somehow there are enough people in this country that believe that's just for us.
Or something.
There's a limited resource here, right?
Yeah, I want to make sure we're still on track with the example that you wanted to provide. Because I didn't pick the example to be political. I picked the example because it's something everybody can see at the same time. So for the listeners,
we haven't gone political with it. I think that we're just trying to be fair at this point. If his agenda was make America great again, we had to try to define what that means, right? There has to be some definition behind that. And I think we're not for or against that. Just the definition of it just seems like that's the definition of it, that and there's enough energy behind it that it's a thing, and it's what everyone's talking about. So we don't know how this will unfold, but it does seem counter to indigo children, and it does seem counter to the age of Aquarius and an enlightenment, new beings showing up on the planet, just more of an aspect of I want to help others as much as I want to help myself. And in past generations, it was all about help myself. And if there's any left over, then I can help others.
Yep. And I think it's interesting that there have been quite a number of correlations between the current president and Hitler, who you referenced earlier. And it's interesting.
I hope nobody in podcast land is going to take what we've said and say that Adventures in
Well,
Truth is
the thing that's
comparing
interesting to me.
Trump to Hitler. I don't think we said that, but
No, no. I'm just saying there has been many references in the news feed and news things that and in opinions and commentaries and all that kind of stuff about that correlation. The thing that I find fascinating about the correlation is not the correlation in and of itself. It's back to what we talked about before, which is if they're making correlations to that energy, that means that what's occurring now is of the same quantum nature that that whole experience in Germany was. Meaning it's a building process. So here comes this individual who is beating the drum of what was.
right.
Right? Beating the drum loudly of what was the patriarchal society, the patriarchal structure, you know, it's what I say or the highway, it's that whole kind of the old patriarchal system. So the magic of that individual is he's able to stir it up and dig it up and rip it out and expose it in every possible way. And we see that in all of the things that are happening, whether it's all of the people that are going to go to prison, whether it's all of the people that are associated with him that are legally challenged, whether it's watching this shutdown of the old guard and the new guard, whether it's everywhere. There's this crazy amount of digging up old crap and saying, no, this way was better. And the other one saying, no, the new way is better. And the old way saying, no, this is the way it should be. And the two of them having no communal language except it's amongst themselves. So there's no, I mean, you watch, it's the most fascinating process to watch something that seems like it should be simple. The government is shut down, people are not getting paid, and people are getting punished, quote unquote, by the process, and the people who are executing the process are not. Right?
Right.
So, but to hear them all do their thing, there's no communal language. There's no, they were talking about this too. There's no, it's like having two different conversations in the same room, and yet they're supposed to be talking about the same thing. So anyway, again, I don't want to devolve into all the minutia. I wanted to try to really be clean about what you were seeking, which is how these unique individuals all evolve through their process and how they make choices based on their own vibration and their own filter and their own understanding and their own community, whatever that is. But I want to make sure we cycle back to where you started with this and make sure we're bringing that home. So, and it's a challenge when you're talking in this topic,
Yeah,
the subject matter.
Well, in this, we started out with trying to make this hypothetical, and you chose a real person. And for us to try to do this, we have to assume we know who he is and what he thinks and what his agendas are. And I don't. I don't know that anybody but he could tell us truly some of the answers to these things we're trying to talk about.
But in the end, it doesn't matter because we didn't know what Hitler's motivations were either. We didn't know what, I don't know what your motivations are. I mean, we sit and do this every week, and I couldn't tell you what your motivations are inside. I could, based on my experience of you, I could probably piece some things together. But I think the same is true with, even if we chose hypothetical, we'd still be kind of making up some of it because we do have results created by actions that tell us a lot about what's happening. At least the version we see, right? The version we can observe, we can see cause and effect. We can see because the again, the universe doesn't care what we do. It's looking for evolution and change. So here is this individual who is a disruptor, is a complete disruptive energy about everything. And it does,
Sure.
and so much so that he can be disruptive about everything on both sides of every topic because he'll
Right.
change his mind. It's a most amazing, fascinating process to watch. But it doesn't matter what he does. His energy is what's propelling this process forward. His vibration is what's stimulating all of this energy to start coming to the surface. And his vibration is strong enough and powerful enough that some people it's impacting in a community type of a fashion. He's drawing those individuals into his field, and then there's the other part that are repelled, and more people are moving to the direction of the repelling of this, what this vibration represents. And then there's all the minutia we could get into. I mean, that's why I keep stopping, because I don't want to get into the minutia of he did this, he did this, he did this, and get into the that and that and that and that, because that's where I think it gets cloudy, because then we do have to kind of create and assume things that we have no way of knowing. You know, his father was an abusive father, and so he has this hang up about whatever. I don't care. He has a vibration, and the vibration is what is creating the outcomes. And it's not any different. It's just on a bigger scale. So there's some another way to even hold that still. So the universe is having a desire to create a gigantic shift in human consciousness right now. And in order for that to happen, all of the underpinnings of the previous consciousness, mass consciousness, has to be pulled out of the ground. Those anchors have to be lit out, because if you can't see it, you can't change it. If it can't be presented, and you go, it's like our unconscious stuff. The thing that I love about the work that I do is it's about bringing the things that are below the conscious threshold above the conscious threshold. So now you have the ability to consciously choose how you're going to respond, instead of unconsciously default to how you're going to respond. So
If we could,
let's stay in the realm of vibration instead of activity, to a large point. Anyway, go ahead.
so you talked about the energy as being a game changer, a disruptor, maybe even a destroyer of old systems, drain the swamp, that sort of thing. What seems to be, if his attempt is to make America great again, we're at a time in human history where we really are more globally minded, and there is more unity in the energy and the frequency of humanity right now than one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I remember that from first grade, probably. But this idea of one nation doesn't really cut it any longer. That we're one planet, we're one family, we're one energy here, and so it isn't going to work.
And even negative, we're seeing the implications of that largely in an apparent negative fashion, in that you see the stock market over the last month going on this unbelievable roller coaster ride, all based on choices and decisions that are being made in different parts of the world. You know, whether it's Brexit, whether it's Syria, whether it's border walls, whether it's illegal immigration, whether it's climate change, all of that stuff is washing over the planet continually, and there's this it's like you said, it's global. So this proprietary patriarchal kind of hold on for dear life kind of thing to the old way, that's the stuff that's being dredged up. I mean, everything from the Confederate statues that they took down in all those in all those states, to these are huge shifts that don't appear right now to be much, but the more that we become more of that global experience. We have to release that identity. There has to be a breaking down of that, the "Make America Great Again" thing.
So let's run with this as sometimes what you teach is an example of what not to do, and this could be one of those.
Say more, please.
Well, perhaps what we're not supposed to be doing right now is excluding and becoming isolationists,
Mm-hmm.
which is what Make America Great Again is all about, was isolationism, independence, not interdependence.
Right.
And
His ignorance of those things cause him to make choices that fly right into the face of that. Everywhere you turn.
What he knows. That's what he showed up to do, and he's doing it. But in the same way that we've referenced Hitler several times. Actually, Hitler's shown up in many of these podcasts for some reason.
He probably appreciates it.
What he taught us not to do was have anti-Semitism, and that's a thing. That's a thing, right?
And it's back.
So again, that was about a racism. It was just, it wasn't in sync with what was going on the planet, and it took a while for the planet to say, we're willing to go to war to stop this, or this just can't go on. This is inhumane. It's not, it's unethical, all those different things. And eventually it righted itself. But it took someone teaching a lesson of what not to do for us to realize what to do. And perhaps that's what's taking place right now.
It sure seems that way. I mean, at every level of our experience, there's some. It's so interesting too, because if you don't put your attention on that particular piece of reality or that particular version of reality, you could pretty much go about your life doing what you do, and maybe something would swing your way and draw your attention. But the fact that, to me, and I don't mean this in any self-aggrandizing way, but the idea that, given the amount of experience that I have, that you have, that the processes that I've been through in my life in helping to broaden and expand my own consciousness in my own field, and raising my vibration, it's a bit of a conundrum to me, knowing what I know, that I would put my attention and focus my attention on watching this thing unfold, because I have spent many years completely ignoring most of it. Just peripherally being aware, but not really engaging it, because I've never found that the person who has that job seems to have very little impact on my life and the decisions that I make in my life. And interestingly enough, that's still true, unless I choose to engage that consciousness. Then I start to then you start to question. Then you start to and so I just wonder if part of that evolution is that again, there's travelers, and there's adventurers, there's travelers, whatever the word you were using before that I'm losing right now.
Yeah,
tourists. We're obviously dialed into this. We're here to somehow add something to the community via our energy. So What is that? I don't know yet. Don't know, but I'm excited because again, it comes back to that what we were talking about before. The self-worth piece. We're here just by virtue of being here. We have worth. So if I am all worthy and I have something to contribute, what is that? That changes the focus of how I look at what I want, because now I'm like, I've got this, I've got a uniqueness to bring to the world that could be of benefit. I don't know how it's going to be of benefit, but that may change how I choose to start walking forward and what that looks like, and true for anybody. Um, you know, we were using Trump as an example. He's dialed into what he thinks, what he believes is what he knows, what he believes, what his end result, whatever that is. And so his decisions are all based on all of the same things my decisions are based on, but from a different core vibration, from a different set of experiences. And I don't have those experiences. I have my experiences. So if there's something I can bring to bear to help the community in a way that can help shift that somehow, or maybe it's not about shifting it. Maybe it's about leave it alone. Maybe it's about hold the space for something more. I know I'm kind of talking around, but there are a lot of thoughts flying through, things about, and now I'm going to bring out the Jesus bomb. But the idea, one of the things that I love about when they talk about Jesus is that the thing that he was able to do, or at least that we understand that he was able to do, is that he never saw brokenness. He saw wholeness. And so because of the power of his ability to see wholeness, he was able to help people heal. He was able to heal people because he didn't see flaws. He didn't see sores. He didn't look at that stuff. And so, there's something very powerful in that whole deal, where that was all about vibration and all about this core vibration of worthiness, walking the planet, being love, that created a transition not dissimilar to some of the other transitions. And I won't go there again, but it was a different transition. It shifted humanity in a completely different way than what came later. But there was a lot of unpleasantness and death and destruction that went on around that. I mean, for crying out loud, Herod killed babies, for crying out loud. So it went from killing babies to killing Jewish people. It's like it's all this. If we can maintain the clarity of what we bring in worthiness to this vibration is on the planet for a good reason, then you find out how you contribute and what do you bring to the table, and then go bring it, whatever it is, because whatever it is going to be, that vibration is going to impact every single thing you touch. And I could probably keep going, but I'm going to stop because you can talk now.
Well, I'm thinking back to the hypothetical, maybe more ethereal rather than the specific character or person that we've been talking about. To me, people fall into the continuum of taking and giving. There are takers and there are givers. But in order for there to be a giver, there has to be a taker. There has to be someone in need in order for there to be the need to give or the desire to give. They both have sacred, divine purposes. There are lessons to live on both sides of that continuum. And you may not spend a whole life on one side, and maybe in one lifetime you get to travel and be on both sides of that continuum, perhaps. But again, in order for there to be law enforcement, there will have to be law breakers and law abiders. And that's just the way that we've set it up. And they all have divine sacred roles. There are some people that feel very, very, very good about themselves policing the community. And in order for there to be a need for policing the community, there have to be lawbreakers. There have to be.
In order for balance to be
But
maintained.
nobody sees the value in the police officers that take tremendous pride and sacrifice and devotion to the point of deadly force coming against them, that they actually have to have people willing to play the other role.
As you're talking, what's running through my head is this idea of the inexorable. How did this come through? So, if you think about the people we've talked about, whether even if we use the three we've talked about now, whether it was Jesus and Hitler and Trump, the amazing thing to me is all of us, and I'm using those because they're clear examples to see, but all of us have that. What was the word I used before, just a minute ago? Just before I started saying that, I got to get back to that word. But anyway, I'll come back to it. The idea is this: regardless of the personality, regardless of the actions, there was an inexorable process that was going on, and they so fervently believed and believe in the path that they are on that regardless of what the actions look like, it's almost like it's inexorable. They have no choice but to do what they're doing, because what they're doing is in alignment with what they're doing is in alignment with what? That created a conundrum. So the conundrum is where I was going was, so their actions, going back to the idea the universe doesn't care what you do. When you're walking in your vibration and you're allowing yourself to be guided by that, it takes you to wherever it takes you. When I have moments of clarity about something, I cannot think that there is ever a time that there is anything that can derail me from that clarity. Like, whether it's right, wrong, or indifferent, or people agree or don't agree, when I come to that place of clarity, you can't move me. It's not resistance, it's just clarity. So there's a certain clarity that exists in their experience that says what I'm doing is right, important, significant, whatever. But what it's creating is a monumental shift. So there's something. What I'm getting at is what got the conundrum going is there's something else involved, because the greater good is what's being created to create shift and further evolution of human beings, in this case, Americans. But that repercussion is going to have impact on human beings all over the planet and is already having those repercussions. But the individual who's executing seems to be on an inexorable path, because nothing will derail him from that path. Nothing I mean, the only thing that derailed Hitler in the end was not his lack of belief in what he believed. It was the rest of the people that went, "You're crazy." But the same thing could have been said of Jesus. You did what? And the same thing can be said of Trump. The same thing can be said of me. I mean, I'm seeing the correlations in my own experience. When you became fully dialed into the things that you were with the automobile and the exploration of that process, even to this day, some things have changed about how you feel about it, but the core of your momentum, your vibration, what you knew, your clarity was not messed with. You couldn't mess with that clarity. Right? Am I correct in that?
No, the clarity was sustainable vehicles
Yep.
that don't pollute and last a long time, and kinder, more green to the planet. I think that we all like our vehicles. No, we're not all ready to ride bicycles and go back to walking all the time, but we can do a better job of making them operate more cleanly,
Yep.
which has
But
been neat to see come around. That's happening on a daily
yeah,
basis. It's just not me
and
that's doing it.
but it is. That's the
Well,
point that I'm trying to
directly,
make.
not directly doing it.
No, directly. Maybe not today, but no, you directly impacted the consciousness
Yeah,
of that whole process. You
sure.
directly impacted and influenced a whole community of people who then carried that forward in their
Yeah.
own fashion, right?
Yep. Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
but the inexorableness of it, because there was the connection to purpose and passion and clarity, nobody can say whether your clarity was good, bad, or indifferent. Maybe there's some people who would think you're a nutbag. Okay. But it didn't change your clarity, right? It didn't change the focus with which you move forward. I think I see the same thing, but on a much grander scale. There's something that has to drive, and that's the drive for is it ultimately evolution? Is it ultimately that the universe, God, great white buffalo, whatever it's going to evolve. It's
Yeah.
not an option. It's not a maybe next week. It's going to happen. How is it going to happen? What's going to have to change for that to happen? If we are moving into the age of Aquarius, which we are, that's a whole different vibration than where we've been in our lifetimes. And in order for that standard to come forth, some serious deconstruction is going to have to go on.
And it is.
And it is. And how remarkable is that? If you think about it, even from the perspective of the guy getting elected, is somewhat in my world, that would be to me a bit of magic. It's his magic, but you can't deny the magic. You can't deny the cooperative components that made that had that come to be.
Right.
Right. And you go, holy crap. So it really changes. So where do you want to put your attention now? Again, the universe doesn't care what you do. So if you're gonna put your attention on the minutia, then you're going to become a part of that consciousness. There's no choice. But if you take the broader perspective, you can see the amazing unfolding that's taking place, and trust that unfolding, very similar to what you and I have talked about before, which is, for me, is that's the core of my experience, is trusting, having the trust and faith of knowing that I'm on my path, I'm doing what I need to be doing, and I'm exactly where I want to be and exactly where I need to be. And that's the case because it's where I am. I'm not anywhere else. This is where I am.
Yep.
And that's not in any way a contrivance. It's a very real thing to me that I go, wow, okay. So if that's the case, how then now, back to the original point, how am I going to use this special worthy energy to continue to influence the evolution of the consciousness of this planet? Wow. I'm blowing my own mind here right now. I'm sorry, but this is freaking huge. This for me is an understanding that I have been struggling with for a long time. But don't need to make that about that. But but wow, what an amazing thought. What an amazing opportunity that every single person on the planet has to do that.
Yep.
Not just me, not just you, not because we happen to have certain teachers and we learn certain things or we're of a particular vibration. We all have the exact same freedom and the exact same ability to say, how can I contribute this amazingness to the consciousness of this planet. And what is that going to look like? Well, the funny thing is I already have, and I have already been, because as I said before, I live in this all day. So, and you live in that all day. So everything you touch, everyone you speak to, everything you do is influencing. It's incredible. I have no idea how we got all the way over here, but wow.
Well, some of that, I think we're still right on track of what do we do, and the universe doesn't care what we do. Some of that had to do with purpose and clarity. It's all of that tied in here right now.
Yeah.
Somewhere toward the beginning of our podcast tonight, I was reminded of one of the things I learned in the rapid planning process when I was in the Marine Corps several decades ago. And we used the 5 W's and the H, the who, what, when, where, why, and how. And what's interesting to me is in the order of those 5 W's, there's actually a lot of clarity in the importance. They're actually in order of importance. Who is the first and most important of the W's? And then the very next one is what?
Mm-hmm.
When? Where? Why? And last is how. Kind of interesting.
Because if you answer the other questions, the how shows up. This is kind of cool.
A lot of times people want to put the why a lot further up ahead. And when people do that, as I have, you can get the when out of order. You can show up before the right time.
Mm.
In the business world, they say location, location, location with regard to where you put a store or do something. And in the spiritual world, the when is quite important, and you can get out ahead and be a pioneer. And as many books have been written about the pioneers that came across our country, a lot of them got shot full of holes because they were unwelcomed and outnumbered by the people on their land that they were trespassing on. So sometimes as pioneers of truth, perhaps, we can get shot full of holes by people that aren't ready to hear what we have to say, or it's a new vibration, a new frequency that they haven't felt, and might be curious to begin to feel more of. And I would just invite the people listening that we're not trying to broadcast this and blast it at anybody. It's a invitational, welcoming opportunity to just hear it, feel it, and ask questions. Again, we invite people to respond to the opportunity on both Facebook and the YouTube channel to ask questions, make statements, offer suggestions. I'm a public figure. It's easy to find me on the web. My email's out there, very easy to find. Would invite questions and would love to provide answers, or what I know, what I would offer back as a response, not claiming to know all the truth, but just trying to operate more in a frequency of love and acceptance and oneness. Those would be 3 words that I'd love to be living more and more each day.
Good stuff, buddy.
Yeah, we're both on the good stuff.
So yeah, it's and just as a way, a little bit of a wrap up is how important it is. I know for both of us, for the listeners to really get that where we're coming from has nothing to do with necessarily judgment or blame of anyone or anything. We're really wanting to flesh out truth as we best understand it, as we see it, and at times we're learning and understanding it even more deeply as we're talking. I think the big difference for us is that there's nothing off the table. And if that makes you uncomfortable, sorry about it, but it's how you find truth. It's how you dissect truth. It's how you come to a better understanding of truth. Is you have to be willing to see it all. I just went through a tremendous process, which I don't know if it translated in what you're seeing or hearing, but for me, the unbelievable, almost powerful clarity of tearing at the minutia of that, looking at, not being afraid to look at Jesus or Hitler or Trump or mass consciousness or how, any of it. It's all on the table to be observed. And this giant buffet, we're picking the things apart and we're going, yeah, that's a little piece of rotten fruit maybe, uh, but ultimately our desire is to bring about positive change, movement, evolution, however you want to look at it. So, the idea is to take it in, feel it, like you said, let it wash around a little bit, because there are things that we're talking about that when you let them in and let them ping pong around for a minute, that unique energy that you carry, some of it will resonate, and it will stimulate things in you that and ideas and thoughts that you haven't had before. And sometimes it'll stimulate things. Those thoughts are like, I don't want to have that thought again. Okay. So, but that's okay. Just know that that our desire in community is to see that evolution take place. And we're deeply appreciative that you're listening. We're deeply appreciative that you're participating at whatever level you can. And we'd love to see and hear more from you. So thanks for, letting us in and listening and participating. We appreciate it greatly.
Right on. Agree wholeheartedly.
Yes. It's another great session. Thank you, Jeff. Have a terrific night.
Jeff.
And to the
Good stuff
people in
tonight,
podcast land, we appreciate you greatly. Look forward to hearing from you soon.
All right. Good night, everyone.
One and all. Good night. All right.